everyone had a refreshing break. And I lost the Etherpad. Okay. Like to do, Shadow Drew brought up a question about backup driver. So since today's driver's day, let's look at that real quick. So I personally don't know much about the backup drivers, I've got to admit. So what we've got is, I just pasted Gorka's summary into the Etherpad. So the container parameter is handled differently depending on which backup driver you're using, and it's not documented. And also for Ceph, you don't even want to use it. So question is, how do we want to?
Well, it's not that, that you don't want to use it, is that most people probably don't want to use it. Because unlike with the other drivers, which basically you are in a tree structure, you are creating either a directory or a bucket within the default location. What you are doing in Ceph is you're going to a completely different pool. And most deployments would not want that. In some, maybe, but most of them probably not. They allocate a specific pool for all their backups, and they don't want users to just go and say, hey, let me use a different pool. Because unlike with the other drivers, pool is an information that it's mostly only known by administrators, storage rate, whereas creating random buckets directories, not. So I think that's probably the main difference. Why for the Ceph driver it's not probably such a great idea.
Okay, thanks.
I don't know if Satoru wants to add something else.
I think that's all. I mean, if we can somehow document this behavior, because otherwise, user will not know that, in NFS, if they use -FN container, it creates a, new directory, and it does not just fail. But in case of Ceph, that fails. So, I mean, this difference in behavior makes sense, what you have explained, but I mean, if we can probably somewhere document it, that would be great.
And on this line, the documentation, it's probably doesn't require a discussion, but if you want deployments to be able to disable this for Ceph, here comes the question. Where do you disable it? If you disable it as a global configuration that can also work for other drivers, like Swift and NFS, then you can return the error at the APA level immediately. If you get a container fail parameter, if this option is set, otherwise pass it along. If it's only a Ceph option, then you don't have it at the APA level, and you will fail at the backend level, let's say, at the Cinder backup service level. So you can either ignore it or you can decide to fail. In either case, it's not great, because in one case the user is not getting what it asked for, and in the other, because then they have to figure out what the hell is the failure is, either via a user message or some other thing. So the API solution, I think, is best, but probably for the other drivers is meaningless, and it could create confusion. So that's, I think, what the main discussion should be.
Yeah, I mean, in case of Ceph, right now the situation is, if I use -FN container and give some name, right, and if that does not exist, user have to basically figure out in the logs that why that backup has failed. So that's a kind of painful situation.
But when you talk about the user, you're actually referring to the Cinder user, which is the administrator. But if this is a public cloud, like OVH or whatever, then the user doesn't even get the option to see why it failed.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, if this is a situation, probably, I mean, the API can probably return some meaningful error so that, we know, okay, so this failed because that, right, I mean, the pool does not exist or something like that, or, uh, yeah, probably disable that -FN container option in Ceph. I don't know what's a kind of good way to handle this.
And then, so right now it would fail if it's a unknown pool, but otherwise it would
Yep.
succeed. Okay.
Yeah.
And then,
Yep. And it could be even worse. The administrator may not know that this works this way, and people start writing in pools that they should not be writing. Like, oh, let's try the default RBD pool. And you start writing in other pools.
yeah, because in general, I think you wouldn't want to expose the pools to end users,
Exactly.
right? You want to do that through volume type or something.
But this is backups. There's no volume
Right.
types here. So, yeah.
Right. But okay. So what would the implication of just ignoring the parameter be?
I think nothing. Just not nice.
Yeah.
Although, yeah, I think nothing would change. I would have to confirm. So yeah, we could just ignore it. Yeah.
So then it would be sort of set by the administrator where the backup's supposed to go.
That is currently the case. They
Right.
define a default location, the default pool, but you can change it with this parameter. So that is definitely an option. To be backward compatible, we would add a configuration option that says disable a container for the backup, and then it gets ignored, silently ignored, or with a warning, whatever we want. And that. I think that should work. It's just that the user doesn't know that the container is being ignored. But I don't think it's too important in terms of any of the calls, because if you can list by container, that would be done at the API level using the database, so that would still work. Doesn't matter. I don't think it has any other implications being ignored. So maybe that's the easiest one, just to add a configuration option to silently ignore it.
Yeah,
And then
but will it be only available? I mean, will it be only ignored when Ceph is used, or it will be like
Yeah,
for NFS?
yeah, I think only for Ceph, which is the one that actually has a problem. Well, has a problem. Some deployment may have a problem with users being able to select a different pool, or poking and trying to find out if the credentials from that user can access other pools. I don't know what.
Okay.
okay. this seems to be sort of a bug.
Not really, because I think it was originally intended as a feature.
Okay. Just
But
not
it's a feature that like a dangerous one, probably. Yeah.
right. So do we have to, yeah, microversion that or I
Yep.
guess
Yep. So yeah.
okay, so your idea is this configuration option, if an operator wants to preserve the current behavior, they can do it. Otherwise, you get the new behavior, which seems to be much safer.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay. Shadow Drew, how does that sound?
Yeah, that's good. And also, if we can kind of mention this in the documentation so that users will know.
Yeah, I guess I'd ask you if you don't mind putting up a documentation patch. Um, at least to give us a sort of example of what would be a good sort of two things. Where's a good place for people to find this, and how it would be a good way to document it. But yeah, we do want documentation. Okay, so this seems to be a kind of thing doesn't need a spec. Could be just like a launchpad blueprint kind of thing, or should we spec it?
I don't think we even need a spec for this,
Yeah, it's a
right?
pretty localized change, right?
Yeah.
I'm just thinking in terms of right. What seems to happen a lot of the PTGs is we get a list of stuff that would be good things to work on, and then everybody forgets about them. So I'm thinking if we at least file this as something other than on this Etherpad, that would be a good thing.
I can try the launchpad issue.
Okay, all right, great. Um, okay, well that was a worthwhile discussion. Any general comments or anything? Okay. Um, let's move along then. All right, so a couple of policy things. This is kind of bad because I don't have a particular point of view about this, but I did want to bring it up. So, as everybody knows, we have this concept of supported and unsupported drivers, and when the CI has been failing, a driver is liable to be pulled out as unsupported, and then it's liable to be kicked out of the tree in the next cycle. We made a change in January to keep drivers around longer. So unsupported drivers don't have to be removed anymore in the next cycle. But the idea is, as long as things are working and they're not breaking the gates or anything, we'll leave them around a little bit longer. And then the idea is it gives the vendors a little more time to get the CIs functioning. And that seems to have happened in the last cycle. So we had a whole bunch of drivers go unsupported as part of the Python 3 initiative, where everybody had to be running their tests in Python 3.7. And then a lot of those were addressed during the last cycle. So that was good. Now, this question has to do with, okay, we've got so, all right, I'm sorry. It seems like everything I was talking about disappeared.
Yeah, I think a whole section just got deleted off of the Etherpad.
Okay.
Or a few sections.
All right, okay. Anyway, I'll try to find that text while I'm talking. All right, so the point is, okay, it's possible to have your driver go unsupported. We don't immediately remove it anymore. And then in the next, so it goes unsupported in Ussuri. In Victoria, you resupport it. That's great. We remove that supported false flag. And the question is that backportable to the previous release? And I think that the main thing is, right, because now that your driver's supported, you would like it to be supported everywhere. So anyway, we allowed that to happen in the last cycle, I think by mistake, and which set a precedent. So we did it twice in the last cycle, actually. So the main question is just, do we want to have a policy about this? What do we think about backporting supported status? Because I can sort of see it both ways, and I'm not sure exactly. I guess what it comes down to is sort of a fairness question, right? What we think about this.
Well, it's kind of hard to know how people are actually consuming that information. But given that it's pretty easy for a driver to get marked as unsupported not too long before it gets branched to stable, it does seem like there should be a way to undo that.
Yeah, I think that makes sense. So maybe we shouldn't have a specific policy about this. It's just basically, if it's getting addressed very quickly, then we're more inclined to say yes. And if it's been sitting there for a while, maybe not. I guess maybe the policy would be if it's fixed before the end of the cycle in which you've been marked as unsupported, then we could allow a backport. Because there's like a 3-week period there where everybody's going nuts doing stuff.
Well, it's tricky too, though, because fixing the CI so that it works on master doesn't mean that the stable branch from 2 releases ago even works. So it's hard to know what it means if you go stamp it as, hey, this is supported now, because maybe it's broken.
Right.
Maybe we should only backport this if there's a run, at least a one-time run that shows that it at least functions on that branch. I don't know. That's a lot of overhead for people to have to go dance around with, though. Like
Yeah, but I guess, right. Um, how do driver vendors feel about this? All right, well, I think the point Eric brought up about the CI is very important. So we need some kind of proof. And then I imagine we wouldn't want to do this to backport it more than one release. Or we can cross that bridge when we come to it.
yeah, I don't know how often that would even come up.
Yeah. All right, then let's not make policies for stuff that's not going to happen. All right, I think we can just update it. So we're not against doing this, but we would require some kind of assurance that the thing actually does function in the environment it's being backported to, which makes sense. Okay. All right. Any general, this topic seems to have excited everybody. Any general comments or anything? All right. So that's a sort of a bookkeeping thing. I'll make a note somewhere on the driver maintenance page about that. All right. Now the next topic is a bit more exciting. All right. So as I said earlier, we changed the policy about removing unsupported drivers. So whereas it used to be you got deprecated and removed in the next cycle, now we've been keeping things around a little bit longer. And as I said earlier, I mean, at least there were a lot of the drivers that were unsupported that we kept that are supported now. So that's been good. So there's been less. The basic idea was we didn't want a lot of code churn for operators who are using the drivers. But the driver disappears and comes back. I mean, this way they're around longer. Now, the problem, though, was that occasionally we have features that impact the drivers. So this cycle, there were two changes that happened for supporting glance, multiple backends, and also image co-location. And so we had to make some changes to a driver. At least one of them was an unsupported driver. So in this case, it turned out that it wasn't a really big change. So that was nice. But you could see like with the ABC class removal and stuff, there might be changes that we're going to have to make as a team to some of the unsupported drivers. So I guess the question is, I mean, there's another one that maybe it makes sense to do on a case-by-case basis. If it's a small change, what the heck, go ahead and do it. But if it's going to be something major, maybe we would just kick the driver out at that point rather than have to make a major change to it. Which we can do because the policy is at the discretion of the team.
I think in general it's okay to do such changes to unsupported drivers because we have to fix unit test at least, and it's okay to fix some drivers even if it is a small feature for this driver. We still can't guarantee that everything will work okay, but we still guarantee that unit test passes and this driver implements interface that it should do.
Okay. Yeah, that seems to make sense. Yeah, and I guess the main point is if the driver's in tree, then we do want to make sure it works. Like with this glance change, right? We could have I forget which driver it was. It's on the review that's on the Etherpad. I think we could have done nothing to it and it still would have passed all the unit tests because the particular change, unless you wrote tests to look for it, you probably wouldn't have even noticed. So that's one thing is we can't really rely on unit tests to catch everything. But we do need to keep these things updated because if it becomes supported, either we're going to have to go back and look at all the stuff that it
Yes,
needs.
that was my point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so it was the virtuoso driver and it didn't have the test for upload volume to image service. So yeah, that passed, but we still don't know if that works.
Yeah.
I mean the unit test passed, but
Yeah, I guess my main point here was, so in this case it wasn't that bad. It was just a small change that had to be made. So that unsupported driver will function as far as we know with the new glance feature.
Yeah, that's such changes looks like some Web 8 fix in case if we've got new flake or Web 8 library independence. We can't skip it and we can't just add no QA tag for this file. Usually we go and fix all Web 8 or Flake 8 or hacking
Right.
errors. It's pretty same.
Okay. All right. And I guess the other question is, as far as what's the general feeling on the team about keeping unsupported drivers in tree?
It's bad.
So, it's bad.
Well, I usually take the perspective that anytime we get rid of a driver, it's a loss to the project in general. So I don't know. I mean, I'm usually in favor of keeping them around a little longer than most people.
Yeah, I guess it's one of those things we can revisit. I mean, I think it turned out to be a good thing we did it in the train to Ussuri transition because the Python 3 thing caused a lot of CI problems for people, and they did gradually address them. So that was good. So I guess I'm sort of with Eric that it's probably good to have stuff as long as, well, our current policy is if it starts to break stuff, we can remove it. If a project explicitly says they're no longer supporting something like Sheepdog, then we can go ahead and remove it whenever we want. So I guess let's just keep it like that for now. Okay. That's it. The only other thing is there's that second review that I mentioned at line 264. It's I forget whether it was Pilot or some tool indicated that there was a missing parameter in one of the unsupported drivers. And I went ahead and looked, and there is a case where it would cause a failure if this isn't fixed. So I think we should fix it. And that's about that. Okay. Any general observations or anything? All right, I need like 2 minutes because I have not actually pulled up the results of the survey about the driver development. Let me see what happens if I just open this. All right, so anyway, what we'd like to do at this point, all right, so stuff's starting to pile up in the retrospective. They look like technical questions rather than general things. Okay.
No, sorry.
That's okay.
The stuff down there is somebody wrote that RBD migration didn't work, and I moved it to the open discussion part.
Oh, great. Okay.
I'll add a section now.
All right, so anyone, do any of the driver maintainers or developers feel like giving us any feedback about how things are going or what kind of improvements we can make as a project to keep things going? Because we do recognize that the backend drivers are extremely important for Cinder. You really couldn't use it without them. So what can we do for you?
We're clearly doing everything already for everybody, so everybody's totally stoked with Cinder. Should we play the crickets wave file?
All right, thanks. So it took me a minute to pull this up. So the results of the survey are that we got one result, so that's good. What is the Cinder team doing well? No response. What should the Cinder team start doing? And driver reviews early on. And what should we stop doing? No response. And no general comments. So yeah, everybody would like reviews faster and better. So okay. Yeah, so we do try to do that. And I do want to remind people, right, vendors can review other vendors' drivers. That's always a nice thing. It shows some activity on the review. And also, as a driver developer yourself, there are probably things that you've run into that you can look for that can be very helpful on a review to other people. So I do want to encourage people to review each other's work. And not just wait for the. I do understand that you can't get anything merged until the Cinder core team has looked at it. But it's helpful if people are reviewing stuff all the way along. Okay. So I don't want to move along too fast past this, because I did want to give driver developers an opportunity to give us some feedback for how we as a team can do things better. But I guess just leave it at that. Okay. I guess what we can do is let's move into the open discussion for just general questions. And we can look at what Gorka's got here at line 276 about the broken RBD live migration.
Yeah, basically somebody said that, I don't know who, that the online volume migration for RBD didn't work. It only worked for iSCSI. Basically, I say nope, it works for other stuff. And it is true that we used to have a limitation on the direction to RBD. So you could move from RBD to NFS, LVM, and stuff like that, but you could not move the other way. But recently, Lee Jargett actually fixed this in the Nova side, because this was a liver limitation. And in the patch, he mentions that, of course, there are some requirements that needs to be met for it to actually work. So I just pointed out to the Nova bug, the patch, in the commit message section where it describes the requirements for it to work.
All right, great. That's very helpful. So hopefully whoever asked the question is still around and can see it.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Thanks, Gorka.
No problem.
Okay. Yeah, all right. Well, that covers pretty much what we wanted to do today. I'm looking ahead to tomorrow, and it doesn't look like we've got too much stuff in there, so I'm inclined not to fill up today's space. I did put something in the chat, so anybody on the stable, and I may have mentioned this earlier, I can't remember. Anybody on the Cinder stable core, there are a bunch of OS brick patches that we need to get through soon, and then there'll be some Cinder patches that we'll need to approve a little bit later after we've got new releases of OS brick. So if you could take a look at those, that would be great.
I think they've all been approved now.
Oh, okay. All right, thanks. Sorry, I didn't go back and look. Okay. Yeah, and then I'll be sending out for everybody else, there's a OSSN. There was a security bug that's just become public. So I'll be sending something out to the mailing list probably in the next 15 minutes about that. And we have a bunch of patches that address the problem patches are available, but we're gradually getting them merged so that we can put new releases that address this. Are there any general comments or any observations people want to make before we move along? Okay, well, tomorrow we'll have hopefully a much more lively retrospective about the general Cinder team photo, so dress appropriately if you want to get included in the photo. And we'll do the happy hour at 15:30 UTC tomorrow, just as an informal way to, it's been nice seeing everybody, which I don't get to do in IRC. So this has been kind of nice. So we can have some informal time together if you'd like that. Any second thoughts or questions? Feel free to mark up the Etherpad. Please don't delete a bunch of stuff though. And we'll open up tomorrow again with an opportunity to address anything, or you can bring it to our attention if something came up that you thought about. Anyway, thanks for attending. I'm going to stop the recording and enjoy the rest of your day. Go to other PTG stuff if you'd like to, and I'll see you tomorrow.